Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our Week 2 main slate preview out there for Draftkings DFS and props. Gonna break down what to expect from this main slate, and over there on the DFS side, gonna give you 3 of my top stacks out there for your lineups this week, and I'll give you a little bit of sneaky leverage out there in GPPs and access to some of the better game environments of the week. And then towards the end, on the prop side of things, we're gonna shift our focus over there to Underdog and Prize Picks and give you 4 pieces of prop value that I found worth taking out there in a few slips that you might want to consider adding out there yourself. So a lot of information, going to keep this one real quick and concise. Let's start it off with our top 3 stacks of the week and how I'm approaching my DFS process for this week. We've got our projections up, and just like last time around, we're looking for game environments with a high total and an optimal situation, and also a team that's not going to be overly chalky. And that's exactly what we're going to get with these 3 options. So the first game environment that I'm going after is going to be this Bengals versus Chiefs game. It is in the high 40s when it comes to a total. You do have the Chiefs as favorites. T. Higgins, the one real big injury note in this game, is going to likely be out there for the Bengals. So it's going to be a lot of Burrow to chase if they're going to keep this thing competitive. And though they didn't work out there in week 1, week 2, they've got another high-powered matchup. And given that they're not massive underdogs, I believe they were about 5-point underdogs the last time that I checked, Vegas still thinks that's going to be relatively competitive. And if this stays close, you're expecting the Burrow-led Chiefs to probably be a little bit more pass-heavy. They could be extremely viable out there in large field GPPs. And what I especially like about this game in particular is how concentrated the offense is going to be without having, as many options like a Joe Mixon at running back. Also going to have T. Higgins out of the mix with a little bit of an injury this week. I could see somebody like Chase getting a 30, even 40% target share out there at wide receiver, which would be huge out there for his production. So I love Jamar Chase as one of your, stacking options out there with a Joe Burrow, but also your buybacks are extremely attractive as well. You've got your Pacheco's, Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, you could go out there and mix in. And though those are probably the top 3 options that I would stick with, if you wanted to get real different about it, you've also got guys like Xavier Worthy that you could mix in as well. And in terms of your tertiary stacking options over there on the Bengals, guys like a Yoshi Vosh, a Mike Gesicki, a Trenton Irwin would all be good ways to get some leverage out there as well. So a majority of these Joe Burrow-led stacks are going to start Burrow, Chase, and then maybe one of those other receivers out there from the Bengals. My buyback likely going to be a pretty chalky option as well. So I would say that this stack, it's still going to have some ownership out there in spots, but compared to an extremely chalky Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, I've got at about 12% ownership, compared to using Mahomes plus a 12-15% owned Travis Kelce, I like this option a little bit more. It's a little bit more sneaky than what you have over there. Of course, guys, we're going to try and stick to this QB sheet over here. All my projections, of course, are uncensored over there at the Patreon page, but as you can see, right, Travis Kelce is like 12.8% owned. So obviously carrying maybe a little bit more steam than you'd want. If you're using that as a buyback, I don't think it's the worst idea, but to have a cute quarterback tight end combo that are both 12% plus owned is where you're starting to get a little bit too chalky. So that's why I prefer the Bengals side of things. This game in general should be a really good environment to go after, and one of our 3 stacks that I'm going to include. Next up, we got this Brock Purdy led team, so that'd be the 49ers out there versus the Minnesota Vikings. And though they are the favorites here, maybe a little bit less sneaky than what you have over there on the Sam Darnold led side, I think it's going to be a little bit higher of a hit rate. They're about 5-point favorites the last time that I checked, and they're going to be without CMC this weekend. That's half the reason that I like the Brock Purdy stack now, is they're not going to be as rushing heavy out there with a Jordan Mason. And though Mason was extremely effective out there in week 1, you'd have to imagine for week 2 that the Vikings are going to try and stop that a bit. If the 49ers are forced to go out there and pass a little bit more, that would be hugely beneficial for Brock Purdy, and then his receivers out there like a Brandon Ayuk, a Deebo Samuel, George Kittle as well, all see a bump in usage with CMC out. So I like their projections in terms of points per dollar. This stack is one of the best that we have out there on the slate. And then the buyback options are pretty condensed as well. On top of having Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, who are both great options, you've also got Jordan Addison, who was already rolled out for this game. So that wide receiver production is going to be even more concentrated out there on a Justin Jefferson. So just like a Jamar Chase, could see over a 40% usage share out there at wide receiver. So he's a great buyback option. He's going to be very expensive on this kind of slate. But if this shoots out, and let's say that the Vikings go out there and surprise us a little bit, well, then Brock Purdy might be forced to go out there and move the ball down the field. So I do have some Sam Darnold stacks. As worth noting that, it's not one of our highlighted stacks on here. I do like the other side of that game as well. But the one that I like just a little bit more, that I'm going to have more exposure to, is going to be this Brock Purdy side, as they are the favorites in that kind of game. Worth noting from the ownership angle that pretty much all of your stacking options are going to be popular. Jordan Mason's probably my least favorite stacking option, as he's going to be much more rushing based than throughout the air. He's also going to be really popular, so I probably won't have that much Jordan Mason out there in my 49er stacks. And Ayuka, Samuel, a Kittle, all getting some ownership themselves. And then these main buyback options out there with Jefferson and Jones are going to be pretty chalky out there as well. So maybe not as sneaky of a stack as you could have. I mean, there's some stacks out there, especially this next one, that could be really low owned, but still a solid game environment, decent ownership, right? It's not overly chalky in any one case, and you could definitely deploy them in a few GPPs. And the last stack we're going to go with is going to be this Baker Mayfield-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers team against the Detroit defense, which Detroit, not a stranger to going out there and letting up a lot of points. But what I like about this Baker Mayfield-led team is that they're the lower owned side. You've got slightly lower ownership out there in Jared Goff, but all the stacking options out there for the Lions are some of the highest owned players on the slate. You've got a St. Brown, Williams, Gibbs, Montgomery, and Laporta that are all getting attention out there. And to try and narrow down the right players out there for a stack can be extremely difficult when you have 4 or 5 of the best skill position players out there in the league. And maybe not the 5 best in the league, but their group collectively out there with those 4 or 5 targets is maybe the best that you have out there in all of the NFL. So I'd prefer to take them as some buybacks and take the slightly less sexy, right, the less flashy plays over there on Tampa Bay, who are also more of a passing heavy offense. If we're going to go after a quarterback and wide receiver stack, it's nice to have a team that loves to throw the ball down the field. And when Baker gets behind against teams, he'll throw the ball 35 to 40 plus times per game. So in a PPR format like we have over here on DraftKings, guys like an Evans, a Chris Godwin could be a really good play out here for round 2. And then a Rashad White with his PPR upside too is the type of guy that, maybe on paper doesn't project as well in terms of points per dollar as some of the other plays over there in the Lions, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them go out there and go off. Week 1, I should say, was really good out there for Tampa Bay. They went out there, scored a lot of points through the air. It would be great to see them do that back-to-back weeks, and if they do, you're getting a really good value stack down here at $5,900. So I like some of the stacking options. In terms of ownership, guys like Godwin, White, are a lot lower owned than some of the other stacking options that we mentioned before. The buybacks over here, though, are where your ownership's going to come in. A St. Brown's got ownership. Williams, Gibbs, Montgomery, all of those sort of players are in that 5 to 10% range. So it's not going to be a mega low owned stack, but at the same time, you are getting one of the best game environments that you have out there. High scoring game, relatively close total, and an offense that could certainly get there as well. If you guys want access to all of the spreadsheets that you see throughout my content, well, make sure to check out my Patreon page. On there, you can download the spreadsheet that you just saw, use it for all of your process, and see all of my projections and player pool out there for this week, not just what we talk up here in the video. So you saw over there on the tight end tab, we've got all those projections uncensored. To download it just like that, super simple, very useful tool. It's going to streamline your process a whole lot out there for NFL DFS. Make sure to check out the link in the description of the video. The best part about my Patreon page and the content that I offer is that it is the best value that you have in the industry. It's only $15 for an entire month of main slate and showdown content for all of the island games, and that gives you everything I have to offer, right? It's not $15 and then, an extra $15 to go out there and get every single showdown slate. It's $15 per month and you get all the main slate and showdown content. So make sure to check that out if you haven't already. I also have a prop tier over there for all of my prop subscribers for the stuff on Underdog and Prize Picks, which, speaking of, we've got some prop stuff to get to, so let's go ahead and get to business on that side. We'll start it off with a look at our Prize Picks exposure, which we've got 2 props that are plus EV out here for tomorrow. So first one would be this Christian Kirk under at 4.5 receptions, which is in the -130 to -140 range for his under on books, and has a really tough matchup against the Cleveland Browns secondary. It's a team that is known for trying to control time of possession. That included with the fact that Michael Thomas Jr. seems to be the preferred target of Trevor Lawrence early in the year. They've got Evan Ingram out there competing for snaps, and Etienne, who's also going to get targeted out of the backfield. Just a lot of mouths to go out there and feed for Jacksonville, and that combined with the fact that Jacksonville is actually the favorite in this matchup makes me think that the under's the right play. If they're playing from ahead, they're not going to have to throw the ball as much. Already a lot of guys to compete with out there for the targets, and when you give me the plus EV lean, all of that makes it a solid prop to take. So that's probably one that'll bump at some point, especially with that juice that it has. So if it's still out there and available, we'll make sure to go out there and mix it in. Another prop that I took with this, so if you want to know the pairing that I took in my exposure, it was another under on receptions. So it was actually an under on Breece Hall at 4.5 receptions, which was ripped off the board. It was in that same level of juice, that minus 130 to minus 140 range, which is why this Christian Kirk prop probably won't last all that much longer out there on the board. But if that one goes back up for some reason, that Breece Hall under on receptions, you could take that as well. 4.5 receptions is a lot for any running back, especially a running back on a team that is favored against the Titans this week. And when you give me that kind of juice, I'll take it as well. So the prop that we're going to take here for this video, though, because that one was ripped off, was another one that I was eyeing. I almost took it for a 3-man slip. I went with that 2-man myself, but it was an over on this Matthew Stafford passing touchdowns. He's around minus 130 on books out there towards the over. And though this Rams versus Cardinals game wasn't one of the stacks that we ended up talking about, it is one of the early stacks that I am getting to in my exposure. I'm going to have some Matthew Stafford led lineups, also some Kyler Murray led stacks, because I think that the game could go over its already high total. It's got one of the higher totals out there of the entire week. So this 1.5 passing touchdowns line, I think, makes a little bit of sense. I think the only worry here would be if Kyren Williams goes out there and has a multi-touchdown game. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully it's a little bit more of that passing attack from Stafford, but that'll be the first slip over there on the Prize Pick side. And then over here on Underdog, I did have to adjust this Najee prop that we took, so I guess we'll start there. The prop that I took for Najee was an over 15.5 rushing attempts, and I only took that slip about 20 minutes ago, so they're being pretty quick with some of these bumps and whatnot out there, which is just another reason to go out there and join the Patreon page so you can get everything before some of those bumps and value ends up getting moved. By the way, the CLV that you're getting on some of these props is worth it alone, right? Let alone the ROI they're going to get out there in terms of your portfolio. But I took the over on rushing yards instead out here for the slip, because on Pinnacle, other sites that have sportsbook odds posted, he's in the minus 120 to minus 130 range for the over. So I think there's some juice starting to get behind a Najee. And the reason why I took his over on rushing attempts, the reason why I think the over on rushing yards is a perfectly fine play, is because it's against Denver. They're going to try and control the time of possession against a rookie quarterback like Bo Nix. The Steelers are favorites. Najee got over 60% of the carries out there in week 1. And I thought Jalen would get carries out there for the Steelers. I mean, I'm a huge Jalen Warren truther, somebody that thinks that he's just as good, if not better than Najee Harris. Well, out there week 1, they did not treat him that way. Najee was the clear bell cow back. They even had Cordarrelle Patterson out there playing on some third downs. But Najee, especially towards the end of the game when it came down to crunch time, he got all of the touches out there for the Steelers. So if they get ahead, especially if they get into that kind of situation where they're running out clock, Najee's going to be the guy running it 80-90% of the time. He's their best power runner. I guess it makes sense why they would use him in that kind of format. And that's why I like him for the over on rushing yards here too. So I think rushing attempts, if that happens to go back down to 15.5, probably not going to happen. But if it did, you might want to go out there and mix that in. But for now, this over on rushing yards works as well. And then I also took this over on Jonathan Taylor rushing attempts. He was only like minus 125 towards the over out there on books, so not a ton of line value compared to the sports books. But what I like is just more of a classical analysis here. They are favorites against the Packers, and the Packers just had Jordan Love rolled out. Now, he could still technically play, but all reports are that he's siding towards not playing this week, which based on the injury that he had, you probably would not expect him to go out there and suit it up. Malik Willis isn't complete horseshit when it comes to playing quarterback, but he's about as close to that as you can possibly get. A bust, he's probably going to be a nobody in the league for quite some time, and the fact that they're only 3-point underdogs against the Colts is, I think, a massive mistake. I think the Colts are a pretty decent team this year. I don't think Anthony Richardson is anything that special, but he's an above-average quarterback. You've got a really good rushing attack out there on the Colts, and a defense that's maybe above average. So I don't think they're the best team by any means, but they're far from the worst team out there either. So playing a team without their quarterback, I think the Colts should be 5 to 7 point favorites. They're currently only about a 3-point favorite out there on the line. And I think as the week goes on, you're going to see people starting to bet on the Colts. Would not surprise me to see that line start to adjust towards them. At least 3.5, might even go to like 4.5 points by the time we get to lock. And this rushing attempts, I think, is going to come along with that. People are going to start to think about the game script a little bit, right? Colts trying to, play a little bit safer against a team without the quarterback. And I can see Jonathan Taylor getting 25 to 30 rushes here. So I like that one. This one hasn't bumped because of the sportsbook line value, but one that I think could get that kind of juice by the end of the week. We'll have to see. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but just based on the fact that Jordan Love's likely not going to play, I think has a big deal for why you'd want to take this over there. So that's a 3x payout out there with that too. But as I mentioned before, guys, make sure to check out the Patreon for all the different slips that I'm taking so you can catch everything as soon as I'm dropping it, as well as the DFS sheets over there on the DFS tier that go out there and get all of your research done on that side. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and prop preview this week. Go ahead, smash that like button before you guys hop on out of here, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. For a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page, if you can go ahead, give me the top scorer for this main slate, you'll go out there and win a free month on my Patreon page. So go ahead, give me your best guess down below. Once a player's taken once, they cannot be taken again. So early bird gets the worm. Go ahead, claim your player down below, and let's go out there and have ourselves a slate. Best of luck out there with any of the exposure that you're getting to. If you're playing some GPPs, go out there, take one down for me, make me proud. If you're playing some prop slips, best of luck out there on that side, and let's go out there and have ourselves a weekend. It should be a fun one. We've got some UFC on tonight as well, so I'm looking forward to going out there and sweating that. Some college football, and then tomorrow, some good old NFL football to cap it on off. So looking forward to it. Should be a good one. Best of luck, guys, as I mentioned before, and let's have a slate.